We will get started here by way of sort of introductions. So those of you who are here, welcome everyone. Really happy that you're here. We will get started in just a few minutes as folks are streaming in for the seminar. My name is Hans. I'm from the Non-GMO Project. I want to take this moment to actually acknowledge that we're presenting this particular seminar from the Non-GMO Project offices in Bellingham, Washington. We are on the unceded ancestral lands of the Lummi Nation, the Nooksack tribe, and the Coast Salish people who've been stewards of this area for thousands of years. I'd also like to acknowledge that our food system has been built by many communities of color, and that we as an industry still struggle with racism, inequity, and other forms of colonialism. So today, we're really grateful you all joined us for this look into GMOs, especially new GMOs, or what some folks are calling GMOs 2.0, and how they're impacting all the products outside of the food space. The categories we're calling personal care and wellness. While of course we're all aware of how common GMO corn, soy, sugar beets, and other row crops are in our food supply, today we're taking a closer look at newer GMOs that are getting into products like soap, cosmetics, shampoo, over-the-counter remedies, botanicals, fragrances, dietary supplements, and other things like that. It's a complex, sometimes overwhelming task because biotech companies are growing, they're expanding massively into the natural products industry. And we want you to know that the Non-GMO Project has you covered. We keep track of this stuff so you don't have to, but we do want your help in staying vigilant because we know most shoppers at the very least want to see GMOs labeled, and more than a third of them want to avoid them. So we can go to our agenda. Awesome. So here's a quick look at what we'll be covering. We'll try to keep the presentation part pretty concise and clear because we're really excited to be joined for the second half for an industry roundtable featuring Katie Banaszewski from Now Foods, Victoria Neilson from Kirk's in south of France, Loren Israelsen from the United Natural Products Alliance, and Susan Griffin-Black from EO Products. We have some real legends in the industry joining us today, so we're feeling pretty honored about that. Do please feel free to post any questions or comments you might have to the question function of your viewer, and we will do our best to get to them during the roundtable. And as I say, we're trying to save as much time during this next hour for that roundtable conversation. One of the most important things we want you to take away from today is that many biotech companies are trying to sell their ingredients and their products to unsuspecting suppliers, retailers, and ultimately to shoppers. On the whole, they are not calling these products or ingredients GMOs, and they're not labeling them as such. So our third section here today is really what I'm calling our red flag list of marketing and PR euphemisms they're using to avoid calling these ingredients and these products GMOs. At the end of the day, if you're a shopper or a brand trying to source ingredients, or you're a retailer trying to carry non-GMO products, your best bet is still going to be to continue to look for the butterfly. Finally, before we get to our industry roundtable, we're going to take a look at sales data and trends that are pretty compelling. Shoppers are still showing a clear preference for non-GMO verified products in the wellness aisles at the grocery store. So to get us started, I'm going to turn the mic over to Linda Cognato. Linda is our Senior Research Analyst at the Non-GMO Project. She's going to give us a good grounding in GMOs generally, new GMOs specifically, and the many places they're showing up in personal care products. Linda?
Thank you, Hans. Good morning, everyone. So first of all, I'd like to give you a brief overview of traditional GMOs, and these are the things you're probably the most familiar with. Traditional GMOs involved a relatively small number of crops, and these were primarily high commodity crops, things such as corn, soy, cotton, and sugar beet. And the majority of those crops were modified for one of two traits, or perhaps both traits, and those were insect resistance, and herbicide tolerance. And those are traits that were of primary interest to farmers. So they wanted to get farmers to grow these crops, and so they made traits that were of particular interest to them and their bottom line. Next slide, please. So for a brief overview of new GMOs transcend the traditional modification of crops. And just for a brief overview, we have a number of new techniques that are associated with new GMOs, and those are terms that you've probably heard of, such as CRISPR or ODM. They also made it possible or facilitated the ability to modify different types of organisms. So for example, they've expanded the list of crops that are being modified, but they also brought animals into the mix and also microorganisms. They offer a wider variety of traits. So as we touched on, where traditional GMOs focused on traits that are primarily of interest to farmers, these offer a wider variety of traits, and many of them are of interest to consumers. We also have a lot of new developers. So traditionally, GMOs were developed by what we now know as agrochemical companies, but now we have many developers, many more developers, as opposed to the handful that used to exist. And these developers are primarily funded by venture capitalists. So if you think of all the money that was made in Silicon Valley and wonder where that money is going now, it is being invested in these new techniques and these new products. So specifically, CRISPR has facilitated the genetic engineering of microorganisms. And this technique, which is commonly referred to in the marketplace as synbio or synthetic biology, or now we're seeing a new term called precision fermentation. This technique uses these engineered microorganisms to create novel products. So these are products that could never, ever have been made by microorganisms in the past. And these products are now showing up as new ingredients in both food and personal care products. Most are created to be of interest to consumers, as I mentioned before, and in body care, they offer promises of, for example, softer skin or silkier hair, and specifically a more youthful appearance. Next slide, please. So where are they showing up in personal care? So these are a couple of lists. On the left, we have a list of the different types of ingredients that are present in body care products, where when you see these ingredients, there is a chance that these have been created using genetic modification, specifically synthetic biology. Also, we note that there are a number of botanicals that have been and are now being created to replace plant-based botanicals, and you can see here on that list on the right. And now I'd like to have Hans come back, and so he can talk a little bit about the marketing terms we're seeing.
Thank you, Linda. So needless to say, there are thousands of ingredients and hundreds of personal care products that could be GMOs now. So imagine you're looking at a skin moisturizer and it doesn't have the butterfly on it. None of the ingredients are called out as being genetically engineered. So how would you know? Well, here are some of the marketing terms that we're seeing when companies are trying to avoid saying GMO. These may not appear on an actual ingredient list, but they may appear in other marketing materials or elsewhere on the package. I've highlighted some of the reddest of the red flags, what I call the red flags. Animal-free, for example, is increasingly common in ingredient panels as a way to signal this type of synthetic biology. Bioidentical is also growing in use, especially in marketing materials. We're also, interestingly enough, seeing a made from sugar claim, especially in this personal care space. And it's quite misleading because sugar is the feedstock that's often being used to feed the genetically engineered yeast or bacteria that produces the novel ingredient. So to call these things made from sugar is a little bit like calling a traditional 100% beef hamburger made from grass. For those of you who will be attending Expo West in March, keep an eye out for companies using this kind of language. Or of course, you can just look for the butterfly and ask companies if they are verified non-GMO, and if not, why not? So let's go to the next page. So let's talk about where shoppers are at on all of this. First, it's worth noting that there is no broad groundswell of shoppers demanding more GMOs or better genetic engineering. But as Linda said, there is a tremendous amount of venture capital coming in from tech companies that are still trying to develop them and sell them. In September, we had the executive order on biotechnology, which essentially tried to establish a bioeconomy to really supercharge funding coming into this space. So we obviously have some concerns about that. It's also worth reminding ourselves that natural shoppers really require transparency, authenticity, and clear labeling. And they are highly tuned to greenwashing, including trying to fool them by not labeling GMOs. So that's why more than 2/3 of shoppers in the US and Canada still believe GMO labeling should be required. And only 13% have confidence in their own ability to identify GMO ingredients when they're shopping. I imagine that number is even lower in the personal care space. Nearly 9 out of 10 continue to trust the butterfly when one of their main goals is to avoid GMOs. You can go to the next page. Let's look at some of the sales numbers from SPINS, and what we're finding here is that SPINS actually is tracking with this consumer preference. Shoppers are voting with their dollars in personal care. In wellness categories, overall, we saw 5.8% growth last year to more than $1 billion in sales for products in these categories. It's really interesting on this slide to look at these particular categories and see where the growth has actually been when we look at it by retail channel. While natural market trends have been flat for growth, but essentially sustaining a strong trend that was established during the pandemic, we're actually seeing an acceleration of verified product sales in mass market. So to paint a picture, you're in the wellness aisle at a mainstream conventional grocery store where you have a full range of conventional and more natural products. When they're side by side, we're seeing shoppers prefer the non-GMO verified choice. You can go to the next slide. This slide really looks at some of the biggest personal care categories for sales growth by percentage last year. Verified non-GMO exploded in personal hygiene and over-the-counter medicines and remedies, as well as sunscreens, repellents, and other skincare products. Now, you may wonder if these categories grew in sales for conventional products, and we wonder that too. And the good news is we actually have a white paper about that we'll be updating very soon. The spoiler alert that I can offer is that we see a significant gap in sales growth between non-GMO project verified products in these categories versus products that either have a self-made claim, they're essentially saying we're non-GMO, but we don't want to have to prove it, or they have no claim at all, which is essentially saying we might or might not contain GMOs. We're not really able to say one way or the other. So if you're interested in learning more about that, you can reach out to us and we'll make sure you get a copy of that white paper. The other interesting insight that we found in that research with SPINS is that organic products actually sell better if they also carry the butterfly. So if you want to learn more about the relationship between organic certification and non-GMO project verification, again, please reach out to us. So now I'm really glad to wrap up this portion of the seminar and really turn it over to the experts from the industry on our panel. So just by way of introduction, we've got Katie Banaszewski. She's the Senior Director of Quality at Now Foods. Her work there really sets a new standard for quality assurance and ingredient testing in vitamins and supplements. Loren Israelsen is President of the United Natural Products Alliance and really a legend in the industry. He's written and lectured on dietary supplements and functional food issues extensively. His contributions have been recognized with awards from the USDA, the National Nutritional Foods Association, among many others. Vicki Neilson is in product development at Kirk's family of natural products. She's worked with some of the leading names in beauty and personal care. She introduced a whole new generation of shoppers to natural care products through her work with Kirk's Family Natural brands. And finally, we've got Susan Griffin-Black. She's a co-founder and co-CEO of EO Products, another legend among legends here. Since 1995, Susan's drive has helped to bring EO's natural products and mission-driven philosophy into the mainstream in a big way. The company and its products emerged from the same set of guiding principles: regeneration, balance, and integrity. So I got you all back on camera and hopefully on mic, and I'm going to let you all kind of introduce yourselves one by one, maybe in the order on which you're appearing on my screen. And then by the way, we wanted to bring Linda Cognato back from the project as well, so she can join us for this part of the conversation, especially if we have any technical questions from the audience. So why don't we start with you, Katie? Tell us a little bit about yourself and your company. What makes your brand or organization stand apart? Why do you all have a commitment to non-GMO ingredients and products?
Thanks, Hans. I'm Katie Banaszewski. As you mentioned, I'm a Senior Director of Quality at Now Foods. And for those who are not familiar with the brand, and I hope that is a very small pool of the listeners or attendees, Now is a manufacturer of dietary supplements, sports nutrition, personal care items, pet supplements, and food. So our portfolio is really big. The company was established in 1968 with a very important mission to provide value in products and services to empower people to lead healthier lives. I know it sounds a little cliche, but this is something that we have adapted and live by every single day. Now is really committed to using only natural ingredients, and that commitment is actually built in our core values. Now is still a family-owned company with locations across Illinois, Nevada, and Canada. As I mentioned, we are committed to sourcing only natural products, and we believe that GMO is not natural. Any modifications to any ingredients is not natural, and we are committed to source only natural products, and that's something that our team is heavily focusing on sourcing not only value but also high quality non-GMO ingredients and incorporating them in our products through formulating efficacious products that then we can offer to our customers.
Awesome. Thank you, Katie. Loren, you're next on my screen. Loren, you're a legend in the industry, particularly in the dietary supplements industry. Maybe by way of introduction with you, you can give us sort of a broad sense of history here and where we're at in a moment in history relative to trying to keep GMOs out of our natural products industry.
Thank you, Hans, and greetings, everyone. It's a pleasure to be on this panel, such a distinguished group. So a little bit of personal background. I'll do the personal part first. I grew up as a farmer, working in my grandfather's farm, and so I well remember the smell of 2,4-D and malathion, and spray planes 15 feet over the ground, and feeling the mist of pesticides wafting across my face. One doesn't forget that. Unfortunately, my grandfather passed away early. He was the only one that would do the spraying. He wouldn't let me touch anything. I think there was a message there that has been resident in me ever since. So from a professional standpoint, I worked in the U.S. Senate for Senator Orrin Hatch. I went to law school, which I hated. Won't make a secret of that. And out of that, I was just by coincidence offered a job at Nature's Way in 1981 as their general counsel. So I took a leap. My mom couldn't figure out what I was doing. She was sure we were growing weed. I kept saying it's herbs and botanicals. And it took her 10 years to figure out. After a tour of the factory, I said, okay, finally legitimate. I can tell my friends my son is not a failure. And so after 10 great years at Nature's Way, I took a couple of years off and formed what was then the Utah Natural Products Alliance. And this was in 1992. The reason is that was one of the periods in time, and we have been through 4 of these within our industry in the last century, where there has been the need for a direct confrontation with government. And this was a very dark point for the dietary supplement industry. We just didn't fit between drugs and foods. We were being pushed into a corner as new drugs or food additives. Both are a death sentence. And having spent time in the industry, I invited 8 companies to sit together and to really think, what's it going to take to protect the health freedom of our consumers and our business interests as well. We concluded it was going to take a change of law, and that is not done easily. Luckily, my old boss, Orrin Hatch, was then and remains the greatest champion this industry has ever had. He jumped in and led the charge, and for 2 crazy years, we fought the battle for DSHEA, which was won in 1994. Since then, my work with UNPA, now 30 years, has been to implement DSHEA as it was envisioned and to protect the health freedom of consumers and health choice of consumers. And those 2 go together. One cannot exist without the other. I have been very interested in, as has been UNPA, in the evolution of technology over the years in our industry. In fact, in 2013, we held a real sit-down webinar. Yes, we actually met somewhere and had a proper seminar together with the Non-GMO project called the Non-GMO Future. And here we are today. And it's 10 years later that we are now discussing what has become a very different future than we envisioned as we discussed the topics in 2013. As Linda said, the evolution of technology in the past, let's call it 3 to 5 years, has been extraordinary. Linda mentioned CRISPR. One cannot underestimate the power and the force that has had. You couple that with artificial intelligence that drives the speed at which you can use these new technologies. And what I believe is the other key driver is this mRNA technology, which we've seen very recently used in the development of new generation vaccines. And the reason is vaccines used to take 8 to 10 years to develop, a very slow, expensive process. As we have all seen and been told that vaccines can now be produced in a matter of weeks or months. And when I first heard that, I thought, how is that possible? And it's these new technologies that make that possible. This is what is driving the tremendous amounts of capital going into synthetic biology. It goes by many names, and that's one thing I'm deeply concerned about, is the confusion of terms and language, and also a co-opting of the actual messages that we consider important. Sustainable. You will hear very often from the SynBio community that this is climate friendly, it is green, it is sustainable. What is a consumer to think? Who do they believe? And so a central part of the work that I intend to do and attempt to keep doing is to try and help make sure that we understand who the players are, where the money flows, and I would say who owns the seeds. Ultimately, I think who owns the germplasm and the seeds of this planet is the most fundamental issue of all. Whoever owns that controls and wins the game. And at the moment, the largest seed collections in the world are held in private hands. There are several public seed banks, one in Norway that's remarkable, but the race is on to own the seeds. So I'm delighted to be here today. The work that the Non-GMO Project does is extremely important right now because it's a technology-driven issue. Organic is something quite different. The non-GMO issue, I think, is coming to full fruition in terms of why it is so important, because it is grounded in this new world of technology, and it will squarely be based on this whole world of GMOs, synthetic biology, by all of its various names. So I'm looking forward to today's session.
Awesome. Thank you, Loren. Susan, you were an early adapter, one of the first companies operating in this space to seek non-GMO project verification. You've had tremendous success, especially bringing this to the mainstream. What drove that initial decision? By way of introducing you to our folks here, what drove you to make that initial decision and to keep that commitment these many years? Oh, sorry, you're on mute, Susan.
Oh,
Gotcha.
okay. Thanks so much for including me on this panel. Happy to be with you all today. So I'll say that early on in 1990, I had the honor of working for Doug Tompkins, the late Doug Tompkins. He was an environmentalist, and he had a clothing company called Esprit, and he had a lot of environmentalist friends. And he hired me to reconceptualize the kids division, which was a very sort of rare opportunity. And I was sure it was my last gig in the clothing business, so I took the job. And through that, I met, you know, Yvonne Chouinard and David Brower and David Foreman and Anita Roddick, and it was a portal for me. I was also studying Buddhism at the time. I still am a Buddhist student, but the interconnectedness of everything, you know, and my experience in really starting to delve into how we produced products all over the world, especially cotton, and what that was doing to the environment, sort of brought it all together. About 6 months after I started working there, the company changed, and Doug's former partner bought the company, and she was under a lot of financial pressure and couldn't really attend in the same way that he was dedicated to these environmental issues. And I was a little bit torn about, since it was my last gig in the clothing business, I wasn't sure what I was going to do next. Talked to Anita Roddick a lot about bringing the Body Shop to Northern California. And it was on a buying trip in London that I was thinking about the products at the Body Shop. And I loved Anita, and I loved everything that they were doing socially and impact-wise. However, the products didn't really stick with me, and I'm a product person. So I'm walking through Covent Garden really quickly. I come upon this apothecary, and I walk in. It was in Neil's Yard, and the smell and the combination of all of the essential oils and the herbs just was stunning. And I picked up this bottle of lavender essential oil. It was lavender angustifolia from France, and I smelled it. And then, you know, sort of, it was an aha moment, and I decided this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. So I came home, and I started sort of looking around at alternative medicine and aromatherapy, and studied, took a crash course in cosmetic chemistry. And EO was actually born in 1995 in the Bloomingdale's holiday catalog, because they wanted us to do 4 essential oil blends, and that's what we did. And so we really have built the company in that way. And I sort of liken, you know, this to food, and you know, the essentialness and the essence of plants and humans are, you know, are one. And I can see this pattern of going from, you know, plants to greed, basically, because that, if you do follow the money, that's sort of how we go. It's greed and ease, convenience. So I sort of got caught up in this in the past couple of years of looking at a few things. One is, you know, artificial flowers now are really incredible. They're so realistic. You know, you could look across the room, you couldn't tell a fake rose from a real rose. You know, at 10 feet. And as you get closer, you see, that one, as beautiful as it may look, there's, they're there. And the real rose has vitality and beauty and connectivity, let alone fragrance, for some of them. And so we have devoted ourselves in that same way to finding and curating the best, most life-giving and life-sustaining way to make personal care products, with essential oils being sort of at the center, and then building plant-based ingredients around it. So this got very complicated over the years, in our, almost 30 years, because where were the standards? What were the claims? And we're very much makers rather than marketers, makers first, I would say. So we got very interested in all sorts of things like, well, you say no parabens and it's grapefruit seed extract, but if you test it, there's parabens in there because grapefruit seed extract doesn't really work. Or so we've been sort of geeked out and nerdy about all of our ingredients because we had to, because we started with 10-gallon pots, and now we have 3,000-gallon tanks. So it's been a very organic process. So where non-GMOs come into this for me and for us is, we were very involved in the organic standards for Whole Foods, very involved in personal care, safety in cosmetics, and also EWG, because, and I'm particularly interested in women's health and nieces, my daughter, of course, just in the fact that how many products people use by 9 o'clock in the morning. So it's so important that people understand and can get good information so they can make informed decisions. And regardless of where it goes with consumer interest up and down and how we measure that, non-GMO verification is the right thing to do for our company, whether our business, goes up and down, or how many eyeballs are on this butterfly. That's the work of all of us in terms of educating, but I'm such a true believer. So thank you, and thanks for having me.
Vicki, it's great to see you again. You have a pretty amazing career in this industry. You've got some insights from kind of having worked both sides, sort of conventional products side of things and coming into natural products. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey, and why Kirk's is really driven to seek the most natural, non-GMO supplies for your products.
So I actually only got into the natural channel in 2012. I spent pretty much the first 20 years of my career, as I used to say, in the dark side, because I was in global brand management for prestige fragrance companies. And then I worked at Bath and Body Works. And Susan, when you're talking about Neal's Yard, I'm having a flashback, because I've been in that same shop as a marketer at BBW saying, oh my God, this is so inspirational. I think I'm going to add this lavender into our synthetic formula. It's really remarkable to me how we have evolved, because the formulas at Bath and Body Works were spectacular from a consumer perspective. But obviously in the 90s and the aughts, it was not about natural. It was about how do we create this incredible environment with wonderful sounding ingredients. And so when I joined South of France in 2012 with a mandate from the then management to refresh the brand, I literally was a novice in natural, and I had to go train myself and teach myself. And I had this advantage of growing up in this environment. And so I went straight to the source, which to me was Whole Foods, whole body aisles. And I just trolled the aisles for weeks, and I read every ingredient on the back, and I looked at claims, and I looked for something that would say to me, who was the non-natural person at the time, what is going to make me feel like this is a good product to buy? And I gradually became aware of the fact that it was the certifications. And in those days, in 2012, very few brands were actually using certifications in personal care. But I was seeing the butterfly and I thought, oh, I need to go look this up and find out more about it. And as I did, I realized this was perfect for South of France because we were reformulating. We were determined to have only high quality ingredients. We were determined that the formulas could last for multiple years, that they weren't going to separate. And how were we going to prove to the customer that we were sincere in what we wanted to do if we didn't put actual certifications on the packaging that told the customer that this was an accredited formula? And so that's how I first became aware of non-GMO. And then 2 years later, Kirk's bought South of France. I went over, started working on the Kirk's brand, and the same thing. Kirk's had been around since 1839. I mean, that to me is so astonishing. 1839 with iconic bar soap, you know, just amazing. I love trying to do this on the camera. Great bar soap, you'll see proudly with the non-GMO front and center. And then we developed a line of liquids. And again, you know, we were going for telling people that we were all about high value, high quality, efficacious products, and we had the certifications to back them up. So we've been huge believers ever since. And then our third brand, which is equally iconic, is the Grandpa Soap Company, which of course has been around since 1878 with its iconic pine tar. So that's how my odyssey began.
Thank you, Victoria. Linda, you mentioned that, well, maybe you can draw a connection for us here, which is clearly there are natural ingredients and clearly there are ingredients that are now being synthesized. And we made it pretty clear that we draw the connection between synthetic biology and genetic engineering. Maybe you could just refresh screen on where we get our definition for GMO and genetic engineering and where the project kind of stands and draws the line on these things.
Sure, Hans. We follow the Cartagena Protocol, which clearly identifies that products of, for example, products of crops that are genetically modified are still genetically modified. So cornstarch is derived from corn, and that cornstarch is considered to be genetically modified. And even, for example, let's take sugar. When sugar cane is refined to, or sugar beets are refined to create sugar, that sugar may no longer contain detectable amounts of the genetic material, but we still consider those products or those derivatives of those crops to be genetically modified. Similarly, when we talk about synthetic biology, which is the genetic engineering of microorganisms, a lot of companies are claiming that because little or no genetic engineered DNA remains in the final product, that those final products are not genetically modified. And the Cartagena Protocol clearly indicates that they are still considered to be genetically engineered. And that's where the non-GMO project stands.
Thanks for that, Linda. So we really are, Project Standard is really just as much about the process for creating a product as it is the end result, which I view as a much more holistic view of product creation and product marketing. Loren, we had a conversation previously that oftentimes the value proposition for a SynBio ingredient, trying to get clarity about what that value proposition might be. And you had a good example of this where you walk into a store, you see 2 essential oils, single ingredient, maybe 1 or 2 ingredients, and one is astronomically more expensive than the other one. Use that by way of sort of describing what's happening in this space, especially to a term that I hadn't heard before. You call it SynBots. Could you say a little bit about that and the danger that poses for the natural products industry? Sorry, Loren, you're on mute too. You guys are being so good about going on.
That's right. Yeah. Happy to. The economics of SynBio and SynBots is really at the center of why venture capital is pouring in, because they believe the economic model really works, which is to be able to produce at scale, largely in a stainless steel vat, anywhere you want, anytime you want, that the end product can be a synthetic isolate, which can then be taken and put put into, let's say, lavender is a very good example. Other very high value natural products, dietary supplements, cosmetics. That's a key part. The more expensive the product is to the consumer, the more likely that synthetic biology will be involved, because that's where the large savings comes from that standpoint. The second issue is just channel distribution. There are different marketing models and sales models, direct selling, practitioner channel, mass market, e-commerce. The multiples of each channel is different, and that will account for price differences across the general market. But then you look at the same channel and you still see these substantial price differences, and that will come down, I believe, to two things principally. It is product quality, and it will be the potential for the use of synthetic biology in those products. And good examples, once again, essential oils, expensive botanicals that you would see, that would be, so ginkgo is frequently seen as an example of that. And that is something that's very confusing to consumers, is how does one explain the difference in price? When you shop for something, that there are normal multiples that you would expect for bread, milk, beer, whatever it is, not a tenfold difference. That is something that we have to help the consumer understand, but it's critical that we do it within the channel of sale of reference, so that we don't end up confusing people when they're looking at different sales channels, where there will be differences inherently just based on how business is done. One is as a business enterprise, the other is as a commercial sale to a consumer directly.
Thanks for that, Loren. So Katie, Vicki, and Susan, I'm curious, you guys who are managing brands, looking at product formulations, I'm curious what your take is on this crazy pandemic period that we've had. And if you're seeing what we saw at the project, which was uptake, an increase in interest in more natural products. Yes, we were all shopping more for all kinds of products, but we saw sort of supercharged interest in non-GMO Project Verified, in organic, in better for you products. And I'm curious specifically about this personal care and wellness space. From our perspective, it looked like a trend that was already happening pre-pandemic, this food as medicine trend, really accelerate during the pandemic and seem to be holding steady afterwards. Maybe Susan, you want to start in commenting about that, because one of your big, one of the things that became a headache for you to manage was demand for your amazing hand sanitizer during this period.
Yeah, it's sort of be careful what you wish for, even under the most dire circumstances. The demand was so insatiable, and we were an essential business, so we were very committed to, especially covering our local hospitals and, you know, first responders in any case, and then that really took a lot of energy to keep that going, and along with hand soap, because those we have two brands, EO and Everyone, and we have those products in both. And so during that, we took a lot of other products off the shelf to focus on manufacturing those products. And so it's been a good, very challenging 2 years of right sizing post pandemic, and you know, just by virtue of the up and the down, you know, we've spent a lot of energy regrouping, reassessing, And really just sort of coming back to what the basics and what we've always done well, which is, you know, being committed to beautiful smelling plant-based products that are healthy and wholesome and affordable and so forth. So our business revenue has declined because of, you know, sort of just the demand, but, you know, we're solidly in place and sort of stabilizing for future growth and category. So I think it's been a good learning, and we're poised for the future. But in terms of formulation, our ethos hasn't changed. You know, we're along where it's green chemistry all the way, and just evolving. As we find out that something may not be safe or may be contaminated or is questionable, whether consumers are aware of it or not, we just start to phase it out and find something that's, you know, we feel is better for you. And, you know, in the case of like polysorbate years ago, that was an issue, and all sorts of contaminants were showing up. So we just, you know, went a different track. And, you know, we did that early on with parabens. It's our job, you know, in this, to represent health and well-being of our customers. So
what I hear in that, Susan, is really a true commitment to continuous improvement, but continuous improvement in that sort of natural sense. Katie, I'm curious about whether Now Foods, whether the pandemic put any pressure on you, on your organization's commitment to the best natural ingredients that you can find for your product lines. And if you felt the same kinds of sales pressures and shifts happening that Susan described, and if that had any impact, positive or negative, on your organization's commitment to a natural ethos.
I mean, COVID affected all of us, some in positive way, some in negative way. We definitely saw a tremendous spike of demand for natural products, and that drive to prevent rather than treat, focus on immune products and immune supporting products. That was just huge. So we were struggling as a company to keep up with the demand. So similarly to Susan, the demand was just so high that it put a huge strain on the company. That was the negative. We were trying to do everything that we could to maintain those orders and fill those orders that they were coming. It was a challenging time. But at the same time, the challenges also came with the supply chain and the ingredients that were coming. That impacted our ability to fill our orders tremendously too. And we see that impact to this day. How it affected our way of doing business and maintaining our commitment to natural, it did, because we had to discontinue some products where we could not find a supply of a clean ingredient. That was the unfortunate thing. We could not deliver what we promised to our customers because we just could not find an ingredient fast enough to fill those orders. So that was the negative impact to our business. But we were still committed to make sure that we deliver clean, efficacious product to our customers. So yes, that was a huge impact, and we still see issues with sourcing ingredients, and we see a spike in ingredients that are not of a high quality. The supply chain situation, even post-COVID, has not recovered, and we're still seeing issues. But we are committed to formulating only with natural, clean ingredients, and we're committed to keeping our labels clean as we always were.
Excellent. Vicki, what did you see in your world? Does that all kind of align with your experience? And I know we talked a bit in meeting before the seminar today about some of the challenges you face in dealing with suppliers and some of the language that Lawrence referenced for oftentimes very complex ingredients that even a professional in the field might struggle with.
Yeah, you know, as a family-owned and operated company, we really operate on a very high level of value to our customer value in our ingredients and making sure that we're not going to take shortcuts just because an ingredient isn't available. We were lucky in year one that we were well inventoried, but as we got into year two, and I was having conversations with contract fillers who were having problems not only with the actual ingredients being available, but even the manufacturing thereof. The one key thing that we kept reminding them of was we have on every one of our product briefs a mantra of these are the must-have attributes. And the two key must-have attributes for us are adherence to Prop 65 and adherence to a high standard of ingredients in terms of what is good. You know, Susan mentioned the polysorbate issues. So we literally, you know, I go back to my beginnings with Whole Foods. Whole Foods, Whole Body has an ingredient list that they constantly update for banned ingredients, as do many of our other key natural retail partners. And so we constantly monitor that list whenever anybody comes out with an ingredient, even if it's not going to be adopted across the industry. Phenoxyethanol is an example. We immediately start to reformulate. So for the pandemic, it just meant things took longer. We were lucky that we didn't have to discontinue products, but we certainly had significant out of stocks in year two, which meant that we just had to work that much harder at communicating with our retail partners literally weekly on where we were and at what point each product would come back into play. But as far as taking a shortcut, that was not going to happen. We were going to stick with our, you know, our mantra, if you will.
Excellent. Well, I have a question really for the whole group, and Loren and I, you and I have had a chance to talk about this. We have some concern that the lions of the industry, I won't count myself among this legendary group here, have this long-standing commitment to natural, to holistic, in many cases to organic, and now increasingly the conversation is around regenerative organic production systems. And yet we don't have the same champions that we had 20, 30 years ago at the federal government level. And we have a whole new generation of shoppers coming into stores who grew up on cell phones. They are tech native, as we like to say, much different than the rest of us on this call, who might be open to the idea that the magic of chemistry through synthetic biology can truly create a product that's climate smart, that gets us around some animal welfare issues. What do we all think about that? How do we weigh in on that? How do we sort of amplify and nurture a commitment to natural, organic, holistic systems in this next generation? Anybody can weigh in on this.
I'll take a shot since we did speak about this, Hans, and I've been thinking a great deal about it as one of the older members of industry now is, and I think the Gen Z, and that's 1995-ish, that's right after Deshays, it turns out. That's the critical generational age because they are the true digital natives and they will become the true tech natives. And it's a very clean transition from one to the other. They seem to have an inherent sense of both trust and the promise of technology. And they have a harder time questioning the dark side. Where could the issues be? And because they're VC funded, the backstories you hear from Victoria and Susan couldn't be more different. Is that they're run by professionals who were designed to make money, and they're going to do that using the fastest means to get there. And to them, SynBio is clearly the way to go. One of the newer companies that is, I think, going to be one of the leaders. Here's a quote from its founder. Extraction from agriculture is the past, ingredient cultivation is the future. And they very clearly see it that way. That is the business model. And this generational difference where I remember going to Expo West and ending up in somebody's hotel room in the Marriott with 15, 20 people just hanging all over the beds on the floor, telling the stories of the old days and the legends of the industry from the 40s, 50s, and 60s. And for me, it was magical of the battles and the fights, and what a deeply personal commitment this was that you saw from these people. That's what I fear, is that the fire that you need to see in the generations that will lead this industry has to come from that deep sense of commitment to the planet, to the people, and to what I regard as a virtuous path. I hope technology doesn't become the new religion for them. That's my deep fear.
Susan, you mentioned there's a choice in a sense, money or plants. I think I'm paraphrasing much less eloquently than you did. And one thing that we've been looking at a lot at the project, and Linda has a special passion for this, is the social and economic impacts and sustainability or lack thereof with some of these technologies. Some of the products and ingredients we're talking about are rare plants, and they, one could potentially make a case that synthetic biology prevents us from overuse of rare botanicals, for example. Linda, I don't know if you want to weigh in on this, but vanilla is one that we often point to. Could you say a little bit about an example of vanilla, the development some time ago of SynBio vanilla, and what its maybe negative impacts were on economic and social sustainability issues?
Sure, Hans. And I guess one thing that I would say is the case with vanilla, as well as all of these other novel products that we're seeing, is that the arguments have been made that they are, well, they're cheaper. They're also easier to supply in terms of not having to worry about natural disasters influencing the supply chain. And we're also seeing that they're sustainable. They're making huge sustainability claims. And I think the thing that's important to remember is that there are a whole range of values that are involved or should be involved here. And so we're looking at specifically, for example, food sovereignty. And we're looking at economic, the ability of people to make their living by cultivating these crops. And so I think that just because we have exploited certain crops does not necessarily create the argument that we should be sourcing them through synthetic biology. I think that we have to look at it more holistically. The fact that these products are being created by venture capitalists has a significant import in terms of neocolonialism. Who do we want controlling our supply chain? Who do we want calling the shots? Where do we want to source our food? And we're seeing this across the board, not only in personal care products, but also in food. Also, for example, in fashion, we're seeing a huge pushback right now in terms of fast fashion. People are finally learning that that is not sustainable, and having, like, quantity does not necessarily overwrite quality.
Thanks, Linda. Well, we are coming to the top of our hour here. We got a question that I wanted to handle real quickly, as efficiently as I can, from one of our guests. She says, they write, I have been told organic is synonymous with non-GMO. Will this still be true going forward with SynBio? Just quickly, we have concerns about that. We would love to see the National Organic Program update its definitions of GMOs and introduce new enforcement measures. But at this point in time, the best that we can offer for you is that organic is not a non-GMO standard or a GMO avoidance standard. It is an article of faith that GMOs are not used in organic, but the best bet is still going to be, especially for concerns around some of these new technologies, to seek, if you're a brand seeking certifications and you're concerned about the synthetic biology issue, to seek both. So that pretty much draws us to a close. I swear we could spend another hour with this amazing panel, and we didn't get to nearly enough questions and more conversation with this group. But it's been a fabulous hour with you all. I'm glad we're so happy that you could join us. I do have a couple of closing slides here, just by way of letting folks know. Reminder that the reason the Non-GMO Project hosted this seminar today is we're actually in the middle of a month-long campaign trying to educate the public, educate the industry about the threat of synthetic biology and precision fermentation in the personal care products aisles at your grocery stores. We have some resources online that you can check out at our website. Love to have you check that out, spread the message. One of our main goals here was really to reactivate the Non-GMO Coalition. A lot of folks have been feeling for a number of years with the success of the project that, okay, natural products industry really doesn't have to worry about the GMO issue anymore. The butterflies got you covered, but with all the new technologies, all the new ingredients, all the new venture capital, it's really important for us to continue to educate. Linda's job day in and day out is monitoring and keeping track of all the daily new developments in these biotechnologies. So that's our purpose for being here. More resources available here. Wanted to let you know that the project is also going to have a presence at Expo here in a couple of weeks. We've got a panel that we're presenting specifically on this issue of SynBio, also more and more being referred to as precision fermentation. That panel is provocatively asking the question whether precision fermentation can be regenerative and what many of the problems are that we see with these new technologies. And then we're super excited to be kind of leading working groups on nutrient density and the direct connection between soil health and nutrient density in the food that we're eating, and really triangulating between climate change issues, soil health, and carbon sequestration, and personal health through nutrient density in rich, healthy soils. So if you're going to be at Expo, look for us there. We will also have a booth on the floor, and love to connect with all of you all. And it's been awesome presenting again here for you today. Last slide, and then we will all say goodbye on this beautiful Wednesday afternoon. This seminar was brought to you in part by the Butterfly Alliance. These are folks that make a direct donation to the Non-GMO Project. We are a nonprofit. Our work is partially funded by donors who care about these issues. So that's about it for us. If you have any more questions directly of the project, we're happy to answer them. You can either email us at info@nongmoproject or get verified at nongmoproject.org. Happy to answer any and all questions and offer any resources that we talked about on today's seminar. So again, Katie, Loren, Vicki, Susan, Linda, thank you all so much for joining us. It was a real honor.
Thank you.
Thanks, Hans.